The NBA season is a little over a week away. It is time to preview it in full. And part one is ranking every regular season offense 1 to 30 and predicting our precious all rookie teams. Welcome to Chucking Darts, a podcast of informed, rigorous, reckless, harmless, speculative, and fun predictions about the game we love. You can call me Chuck. This is episode number 179. Episode 178 last week was with Esfandiar Baraheni of SDPN, a Raptors Republic contributor, credentialed reporter for the Toronto Raptors. We talked about most improved player, and as an entryway into that conversation, discussed Scotty Barnes in Toronto, how he's expected to take on a much bigger role for that team, previewed the Raptors, and also talked about sort of the East play-in race, all these teams that could finish anywhere from really 5 to 12, and where we thought that might all shake out, who we liked and who we didn't like. In addition to handicapping, as I said, that most improved player field. Very fun episode. Be sure to check that out on, wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube. I'm Chucking Darts on YouTube, so trying to get that up and running as I can. But today, a guest I'm always so glad to have on. He has hold of two Chucking Darts annual traditions. I think he's the only person who can claim that distinction. He's Sam Ferris at Draft Dummies, hosts the Locked On. Is it Locked On NBA Draft podcast that you host?
Yep.
There you go. And he does two things every year with me. He ranks offenses 1 through 30, which is what we're about to do, predicting where the offenses will finish in the regular season in terms of points per possession. And he also does the dart rank every summer, where we take the last 3 draft classes and we basically essentially redraft them. We go up to 30 players and we say, here's where we think they're all going to shake out. Here is who we would want to build around. And we alternate, he does pick 1, I do pick 2, so on to 30. So that episode was probably 6 or so episodes ago in the queue. If you want to check that out, still obviously very relevant since the season is not tipped, but it is all rookie time and it is offense time. So Sam, how are you? Hope you're ready to run and gun and get loose with me here.
I'm always ready. I look forward to both of our 2 annual traditions. One and one to go. So today we're going to be looking more forward at the NBA this year, starting with the all rookie predictions. And I had my my 2 teams of 5 each obviously laid out. And just as we were kind of starting up, I've added 5 more that I might swap in. So I can still be convinced, let's say, on the last 2 or 3 spots here at least, but at least 15 guys that are under, good consideration, and a very fun rookie class.
Yeah, how spoiled are we to now have to, cut it down from 15 to 10 in predicting this? I mean, we are both optimists. You kind of have to be in order to be a draft hobbyist the way that we are. But,
Yeah.
in just 5 years ago, no, not 5, because the class of 2018 was stacked, but say 7 years ago, you would struggle to try to think of how 10 rookies might positively impact their team. And, historically, like Rookie of the Year, all rookie teams have sort of just been a counting stats award. Anyone who gets on the court for any length of time has tended to make a team, but that is starting to peter out a little bit. Last year, the 2022 class was loaded with contributors, loaded with them. And hopefully this class is no different, though the strengths of this class, I don't know, are going to be so immediately available as there were last year. I think there was a bit more maybe scoring depth, a bit more shooting depth last year in the top 10 than maybe there was this year. But we'll see. We'll see. But I'll kick it to you. Give me your first team all rookie.
So this year's rookie team is really benefited by the fact that Chet Holmgren did not play last year. I had him number 1 in that draft class. And what's funny is I didn't feel great about that after he got injured. And Paolo looked amazing, but I'm still very high on Chet. I would still probably take him number one, and he's looked fantastic both at Summer League when you and I watched him together there in Las Vegas, and now in preseason, he continues to look fantastic. So, without further ado, my first team: Wemby, of course; Scoot, of
Mm-hmm.
course; Chet, of course, and then I have both Amen and Asar as well on my first team. I think the top three are pretty obvious. And again, what I look at here is a combination of opportunity. Like,
Mm-hmm.
are these guys projected to play and actually get minutes, enough minutes to put up, relevant stats to qualify for these distinctions? And then number two is just talent slash, are these guys ready to play right now in the NBA? So combination of readiness, talent, and then opportunity. So that's mainly what I looked at. Um, and the first team, I guess the only thing that didn't necessarily go in order there is I've got Brandon Miller on my second team.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Uh, I have a very similar first team to you, and you're right. I mean, those top three, Chet's going. If everyone is in agreement that the Thunder are going to be at least competitive, which I think they're going to be, we can get to their offensive ranking in a moment. Chet's going to be a starter for that team, and though I might have a little bit of question as to whether or not his shooting is going to translate so immediately. I mean, he's a great shooting prospect. I don't know that he's going to shoot 37% from three on like hefty volume this year, but the feel that he plays with is something that's going to translate. I don't think his starting spot is in really any jeopardy. So he's more or less a lock. You start for a team that wins 40 games or more, you're on. Wembenyama, he's on. Scoot, with how much the ball is going to be in his hands, how much he's going to play, he's on. I agree with you on one of your two Thompson selections. I agree with you on Asar. I
Oh,
do
wow.
believe that he is going to be first team all rookie. Um, Amen is on my second team. And the reason why I have a little bit of a question with him is that I think that Asar is going to play on the wing because he provides a dimension on that team, that athleticism, really from a wing-sized guy. You know, Jaden Ivey's very athletic and bursty, but he's a guard and plays as a guard. But Asar's connectivity is something that really complements Cade Cunningham. His athleticism as a wing is something that complements Cade Cunningham because Cade, very skilled guy, but not the most athletic in the world. And so I think Asar is going to, if he doesn't start right away, he's going to start a lot of games for Detroit. I don't see Amen getting the same amount of opportunity in Houston. I think that he'll be sort of their de facto point guard for a while. But everything that I hear out of Houston, and I did an episode with Salman Ali on them a couple of weeks ago, is that the ball is going to be in Jalen Green's hands so much that I think there might be a healthy amount of staggering between him and Fred VanVleet as Houston tries to win as many games as they can, because their pick is basically owed to the Thunder. So while Amen will play, I don't know that he's just going to be gifted all these backup point guard minutes. And though he'll do some breathtaking things while he does play, his shot when he's off the ball is still going to be something Houston really has to work around. I think it will be sort of a glaring flaw. And I think that that will cost him only ever so slightly as he goes from first team to second team. But this is a bit of a swing by me on this fifth slot, but I am going to go with Keontae George, the Utah
Okay.
Jazz, as my fifth first team player. And Keontae was a player that I think I was lower on than most coming into the draft. That's an L I've already, taken, swallowed, digested. It is a part of
Yeah.
my being. Sometimes you just get it wrong, and I got it wrong with him. Um, Keontae is going to be able to provide, like, at least off the catch shooting right away, but I think that he is, ironically enough, going to play a healthy amount of backup point for the Jazz. And if he is good enough in the first half of the season in Will Hardy's system, relocating, setting screens to invert for Larry Markkinen, who's, sort of the center of their offense, then I could see him getting some starting opportunities later in the year as the Jazz maybe do sort of a quiet tank if they are not, in playoff position, which they probably won't be. But Keontae, great range, pretty good awareness. Not the most gifted athlete, but that offense is so well spaced and it has so much off-ball activity for those guards that I think it compensates a lot for maybe the lack of his like extreme first step. Keontae also great free throw drawer, at least he was in high school. And so I'm hoping that he's put in enough positions to sort of leverage a little bit of that. They have 3 rookies who are all good, Keontae, Taylor Hendricks, and Bryce Sensabaugh, but it seems that they are much more intent on getting Keontae time and having him be a regular part of their rotation. So I believe in him. I maybe this is me trying to make up for past sins, but I got him as the 5th guy on my first team.
Yeah, not much difference. I have the players ranked in terms of my confidence in them going into this season. So I have him 6th. So he's basically number 1 on my second team.
Okay.
And same with you. Like we talked about this when we were together at Summer League and then when we recorded after that. I think Keontae George was maybe the only guy that I significantly changed my outlook on based on Summer League. And again, same as you, I was lower on him being, a smaller guard that projected more to be like an off-ball guy for me. But then, he lost weight, got into better shape, and looked more explosive in Summer League. And like in college, his 1 year at Baylor, I think he only had 3 dunks, and he's had more than that now just in Summer League and preseason combined. So both in terms of the numbers and just the film, when you watch him, he just looks different than he did at Baylor to me. And Utah has their front court set for the future in Kessler, in Lowry Markkanen, but they've got this kind of weird group of guards. And I know that they would hope that Keontae George rises to the top and is ready to play because he's got the most potential long-term for them for sure. And he's really the only guy that can kind of, bomb threes off the dribble. And so that kind of adds a new element to their team that they don't have right now. And so they're hoping that he has that kind of season. And the reports out of training camp and out of their open runs have been good. So I've also got him there on the second team. And one other note I'll make is when I made this, I had Brandon Miller second team, but at that point I assumed that Miles Bridges was going to play a full season. I don't know if that's the case. If Brandon Miller ends up starting, then I could very well move him up to the first team. So I just wanted to add that note in as well.
Yeah, well, let's use that to go into your second team and talk about Brandon Miller. Okay. Segue that on through. So who joins, I guess, Miller and Keontae on your second team?
So right now I've got Cason Wallace, Jarris Walker, and Ant Black.
Oh, okay. All right.
But I've got 5 more guys that after Keontae George and Brandon Miller, I feel much less sure. I think Cason Wallace, based on what we've seen in preseason, they're going to give him a chance to play. But they're just so stacked with young players that if he doesn't produce right away, I could see his minutes getting cut down. And so the opportunity, while I believe in him as a player, the opportunity year 1 is what makes me a little bit skeptical of having him there. But I did go ahead and include him. He's the guy I was higher on in the draft and think, his defensive ability and just his ability to make opportunistic plays, both defensively and offensively. And obviously they value him trading up for him in the draft. And then Jarris Walker, he's not going to start.
Nope.
And in their preseason games, at least in the first game, he didn't even play in the first half, which is, assuming their regular rotation. So that makes me a little bit concerned, but I think he's shown enough. And obviously they drafted him top 10 like they're not competing. I'm going to assume, well, maybe they will compete. They've looked good in the preseason. I'm not going to doubt Tyrese Halliburton. I don't see them as anything more than like a play-in team this year. So I would assume that they're going to give opportunity in minutes to Jarris Walker. And then Ant Black, again, opportunity in minutes is the question mark there. They've got a jumble of guards with Suggs, with Cole Anthony, with Markelle Fultz. But again, drafted him top 10, and I think he's going to be, when he plays, he's going to put up stats. He's going to be on the ball a little bit, rebounds, assist, points. Again, counting stats do still matter here. And so, like, I could be convinced. I'll just quickly name off the other 5 guys that I considered, which was.
Well, hold on. Before
Okay.
you do, I'll name mine just
Okay.
to see what this difference is, because we do have a difference.
Okay.
I have a men and I have Jarris. Okay.
Okay.
The other 3 might be different. Oh, no. So I have Amen, Jarris, Derek Lively
Okay.
on the Mavs, Bilal Coulibaly on the Wizards, and Marcus Sasser on the Pistons. So are they all a part of your next 5?
So all of them were except for Marcus Sasser.
Okay.
I had Hawkes, Cam Whitmore, Derek Lively, Julian Strother, who's looked awesome in preseason. So I'd be remiss not to mention him. And then Bilal Coulibaly too. So as I was doing this, I thought this was interesting. So I'll pitch this question to you. Who do you think plays more, Bilal Coulibaly or Cason Wallace?
Bilal. And that it's a good thing you bring that up, because I like Cason. I think I had him 14th. I forget if he went in our exercise, but I did my piece where I ranked, 100 of these guys, just my rankings, and I had Cason in like the 30s, which means he's a consensus lotto talent. But the Thunder they are trying to develop. They're not trying to skip any steps, but they also are on Shai Gilgeous's timeline. And Shai maybe doesn't want to skip steps, but he wants to take the next step as far as winning goes. And since they have Chet, who's a rookie, an advanced rookie, but a rookie, Kason, I'm going to get that wrong a million times, and Misic, who they just signed to this 3-year deal, they still have Isaiah Joe, who's going to play a lot for them off of their bench, and I think who provides a shooting gravity in a lot of their actions. That
Kenrich Williams is going to play.
Kenrich Williams, Aaron Wiggins, he's going to play. Like, I just think that Wallace might get squeezed a little bit. And though Wallace is a good shooter, he's not really a movement shooter. He's a catch and shoot 3-point shooter, and he can sort of make sort of contested floaters off the dribble a little bit. But I don't know how many of those OKC really wants as part of their regular team shot diet this year. So that's my only thing against him, is I just think he's on the wrong team to get the opportunity. And to contrast him with Coulibaly, you mentioned, last year a couple guys found their way onto all rookie teams because of sort of their defensive precociousness, where they sort of separated themselves as defensive rookies, not necessarily super positive defenders, though one of them was, but just guys whose tools stuck out so much that they claimed more and more minutes. And so they got enough to make an all rookie team. And one was Jeremy Sohan and the other was Tari Eason. I'm very high on Bilal. I am on record as being very high on Bilal. I think he is, as a pure athlete and, from a tools perspective, I think he is the most gifted out of Sohan, Tari, and himself. Now, there's other qualities that go into that. And Tari was also, I think, 20, 21 years old when he came into the league. More advanced player than Bilal, but Washington is not going to be good. They've invested in Bilal. He's the highest drafted member of their team. And even in preseason, like, you see just the unbelievable defensive tools that this kid has, how he does not only like hold up already on his matchup, but actively disrupts them and can cause deflections one on one, can rotate and provide all this verticality at the rim. And I just think it's the sort of thing that in a year where the Wiz are going to be in contention for the number one pick anyway, they have every incentive to play him as much as they want and see what they have. So his unbelievable defensive tools as a wing, to say nothing of like his aggression as a finisher. He gets up off of 1 foot so easily. He'll be able to slash. He has passing vision. Like, there's going to be a lot to like with him. And so that's how I think he finds his way onto the second team. So, but we haven't gone through all of our picks, so I'll kick it back to you. But that's sort of my thought with both of them.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I was thinking about this earlier in terms of like there are so many good teams in the NBA this year. Like pretty much every team outside of maybe like Portland, maybe one or two teams in each conference really believe they have a chance at the playoffs this year. And for those teams that really aren't ready to compete, pretty much all of them have a cornerstone in place long term on their roster. I would say maybe the two that don't that come to mind maybe is Chicago, just because I think they need to blow it up long term and kind of restart. And then Washington is the other one. And so Koulibaly's they just drafted top 10. They're going to give him, I think, I know they've talked about playing him in the G League some. Maybe that ends up happening, but I think they're going to give him every opportunity to see what he can do, give him some ball handling reps even at times. But like you said, the defensive tools stand out right away. It's very difficult to be an impact defender as a teenager in the NBA. But I think there'll at least be flashes where we'll say, like down the line 2-3 years from now, maybe even a shorter timeline, if you really believe in him, that this guy is going to be an all defensive level player. Yeah. So Jarris Walker, we both had. Did you have Ant Black?
I did not, but okay. I'm also like, I'm lower on Ant Black and have been lower on Ant Black the whole time. I like with him.
So was I.
Yeah. So like, yeah. I think Fultz and Suggs are better players than him. Yeah. I think that, the Magic are trying to be good right now. So it's not as though they're not going to play Gary Harris. Cole Anthony's still there. Like he needs to really like win his minutes. Like nothing is earmarked for him. And since he can't really space for Paolo and Franz yet, and spacing is the team's challenge, I just don't see how he gets the consistent minutes to do it. So that's my thought with him.
Gary Harris has got to be one of the most forgotten players in the NBA. It's like Gary Harris is still on the Magic, and he's a pretty good player. I wouldn't be surprised if a playoff team, or maybe the Magic are a playoff team, but more of a veteran team acquires him. But agreed, I was very high on Suggs, still am, so I would clearly rather have him than Ant Black. And then Markelle Fultz, somewhat quietly, has become a very good NBA player. But the thing is that those three guys have somewhat similar strengths and weaknesses, and that none of them really shoot it that well yet. Suggs at least has like the elite defensive flashes and moments, and Fultz is the best player of the three right now. So I agree with you. I think I would put Black third in terms of the minutes that those guys are going to get, and that's why the end of this list was so difficult for me.
Yeah. Well, and so talk to me about Miller, because Miller's someone who did not make my first or second team.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, and I understand that he's going to like play minutes. And is that just sort of, you're just like, it's almost like a too big to fail. It's like too many minutes to fail.
Yeah. Too many minutes to fail. Yeah. When you were saying your second team, I was like, did you say him on the first team? I can't remember if I missed. Yeah. Especially now, if he ends up starting with Miles Bridges potentially missing the season, too big to fail, too many minutes. The argument against him is that he's not going to have the ball in his hands. Like this team actually has like decent players. LaMelo Ball is a candidate to make a jump and be the top 20 player this year, but we're talking about Gary Harris is a forgotten guy. Like Terry Rozier, still a good NBA player. Gordon Hayward, still a guy that they paid a ton of money to, and he's going to get the ball a little bit. So he's going to play more off ball. He's going to make catch and shoot threes. He'll attack when the ball is swung to him. But to me, like, I don't see where he stands out in terms of a ready-made skill right now outside of the three-point shooting, as well as the opportunities, a question mark. No, I still had him 7, so I just think he's going to be playing 25 plus minutes per game. Like, they drafted him that high. Like, they need him to look good for a franchise that has gone through a lot of bad stuff over the last few years. Um, and I do think that he didn't look great in summer league, but he's going to look a little bit better with guys like LaMelo feeding him, and I think that's going to help. But I was a guy that was a little bit lower on him. I think I had him like 5th or 6th in the draft. I clearly thought they should have taken Scoot at that point, and I think that's probably a sentiment that we both
Yeah,
share.
we do. But yeah.
But I guess where do you see? Do you just think he's not going to put up numbers? Do you think they're going to play? He's going to kind of fall out of the rotation?
Well,
Or
I think even with Bridges, and Bridges is suspended 10 games back from his plea deal anyway. So he's going to miss the first 10, and then with his new allegations, who knows. But I think that the next person to start, because they have Hayward and PJ Washington. So those two are going to start at the 3 and the 4. And Terry has started at the 2 next to LaMelo for a long time. So I still think that Miller is coming off of the bench for that team, number one. And I think that, Charlotte is a confounding team. Even when you put all of the off the court stuff to the side, I I've watched a little bit of their preseason, and it's hard to see the organizing principle of their offense. We'll get to their offense, as we do these rankings. They'll be in some tier that we cover. LaMelo's obviously a very gifted offensive player, but I I have not I have my concerns that this is going to be an offense that like has a lot of structure. I think they're going to run a lot because LaMelo wants to run a lot. I still think LaMelo is going to take every shot that he wants because he signed his extension, and they're not like Steve Clifford might try to say I'm coaching you really hard and I'm going to try to mold this offense in a particular way, but I just think that Steve Clifford is kind of I just don't think he has the reins and maybe the empowerment of the front office to coach it that way. So I still think that the offense is going to take on sort of the personality that LaMelo Ball brings to it. And maybe because they're going to run so much, that will like goose up Brandon Miller's numbers even off the bench to where he's averaging, 11 or 12 points a game or something like that. And if he is, then I could certainly see him making a second team, but he's going to suffer from sort of expectations management because as the second overall pick, like, of course you're expected to start for your team. Like, how could you possibly not start as the second overall pick? But he's not going to. And I think that his strength deficiency, which was a big part of his tape at Alabama, is going to come up. I don't think he's going to be able to operate in the lane, that well year one. I think it will eventually be part of his game, but I just am not sure that he's ever going to find his footing. I think it's going to be hard for him to find his rhythm, like in an offense this fast. And so I just sort of think that the current is against him for this season to be what people hope that he is. And so because of that, I think there's going to be enough guys to sort of nudge him out. That's how I feel.
Yeah. Just to finish up on him, I kind of compare my expectations for him similar to what Jabari Smith did last year. I think Jabari Smith's the better prospect, and they're not entirely similar, but the struggles that he went through in terms of the lack of strength and the difficulty finishing the lane are going to be similar for Brandon Miller. But again, similar in terms they're both top 3 picks. I think Brandon Miller is going to be given minutes. And just like Jabari Smith kind of had an underwhelming year last year, still just because he played so many minutes and put up enough numbers, he did still make the second team. And so that's why I ended up having him there. It'll come down to whether these guys a little bit further down the list have good years or not. Like, lots of times there aren't 10 great rookie seasons that are really, they're worthy because they make it, but it's not like the most fantastic rookie seasons that you're debating on. So it kind of depends the strength of the depth of this class in terms of their production this year. So I guess that's what it's going to come down to.
Yeah. And since you didn't have Sasser on your team, I'll just remark on him quickly. I
Yeah.
think that, recent years, there tends to be a sort of older backup point guard prospect who comes into the league, plays immediately, and is a positive in their minutes pretty quickly. Andrew Nemhard would have been this last year, a Jose Alvarado the year before that in New Orleans. And I think that Sasser is like a very clear candidate for that in Detroit. Now, I'm not saying that Detroit's going to be like a playoff team, not
Yeah.
in that way, but Sasser can shoot now. He can shoot off the dribble now, can certainly shoot off the catch now. He can operate a pick and roll, and he can guard a point of attack. And Monty Williams loves him and is going to want to find minutes for him. And I think that he will be a consistent rotation piece. And because, we can debate sort of the value of having a backup point guard who like guards really hard on the ball. That's what Davion Mitchell does. And I don't know that his impact is amazing in Sacramento. But in terms of making a first impression with these sorts of voters, that it's stuff that lots of people like to see. Someone who plays really, really hard, knocks down their shots, is a polished player, can execute a defensive scheme. I think that the Pistons, even if it doesn't necessarily show up in the win column, are going to be a lot more competent. And I think Sasser is going to be sort of one of the faces of sort of this new direction under Monty Williams. And I think that will be enough to get the Pistons to all rookie members in Asar and in Sasser. And so let's see. We had another difference, didn't we? I mean, we had, because it was, I had Bilal, Jarris, Amen, Sasser, and Lively. Lively was the other one.
Yeah,
and so,
I had him on my others considered, so he was 13th on my list.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think, I think Lively, I don't know if they're really, when it comes down to it, if he's going to start most of their games, but I think that he will play 15 to 20 minutes a night. And I think we'll get to Dallas's offense, but I think their offense is going to be very good. And that's going to be another team that maybe they don't win 40 games. That's possible, but they have the talent to. They certainly do. And so I think that though Lively's stats are not going to pop off, I'd be surprised if he averages more than like 5 or 6 points a game. He'll play for them. He'll have chemistry with Luka because it's impossible not to as a big with his athleticism. He'll make some eye-popping defensive plays, and so that's enough for him to sort of get on my second team.
Yeah, agreed. My thought process on him was it took him like 2/3 of his freshman season at Duke to really start to positively contribute to a team, and that was in college. So like he's still young, and I just would expect based on that the learning curve is gonna take a bit for him as well. Like I spoiler alert on Dallas, they're a team that I'm lower on this year heading into the year, so we'll talk about that in the next segment. But I get the excitement. I've been there as a fan about rookies, but a rookie that's that young playing a key position, like I guarantee you by the end of the year or sooner, we're going to be seeing more of the veteran options at center. And I don't see him holding on to a role, especially when they're in playoff contention, playing like starters minute. Maybe he is just kind of a spot starter and it's just like 14 minutes a game. But I don't see him being a guy playing more than that. I do still like him as a prospect. I think I had him like 10th, but I see him as a guy that, the end of year 2 is when he figures things out. And we've seen that in preseason, like Gobert just caught the ball, backed him down, dunked on him, and not just stuff like that, but he doesn't know exactly where to be. He's super foul prone. And so like Dallas needs to prove to Luka that he should stay there. And so I don't know how much, how long the leash is going to be for guys like he and Omax Prosper.
That is a great point. You are probably right. This may be a bit of wishful thinking. I love I still believe in Derek Lively too. I had him around the same place that you did.
Yeah.
And I want him. Like the idea of him is so enticing to me as a guy who embraces being a low usage center, but who's this very unique defensive weapon and who is always like sort of a bailout lob threat to just run a pick and roll at the end of a possession and occupy the defensive attention with either Luka or Kyrie. Who's ever on the other side of that action at any given point in the game. I love the idea of that so much, especially since he's a good passer out of the short roll, like a good kick out passer, legitimately a good one now, that I may be like wishing it into existence maybe a year or two too early. That is certainly possible. But, if ever there's a time to wish something into existence, it's, October 16th before the season starts. So have we talked about all of your second team, or is there anyone else you wanted to get to?
No, I think we talked about everyone that I had on there.
Yeah, I'm going to want to talk about Jaquez at some point, maybe when we get to the Heat. But I think he's going to be a popular pick for these all rookie teams because there's buzz around him in camp that he's really going to play, and he's a wing, and he seems to fit the Heat's identity that, that they have branded about themselves. I want to put a pin in him. We got to get to these offenses, but when we come around the Heat, I want to talk about Jaquez. So,
all right. I got my offenses notes pulled open now, so ready to.
Let's go. You kick it off. How many teams are in your top tier?
So I didn't really do it by tiers, but I guess I could just go off the top of my head. I'll say 2.
Okay, go ahead.
2 teams. Yeah. Do you want me to say who they are right now?
I would love it.
All right, Phoenix and Denver.
Okay. I had a top 4 that Phoenix and Denver were both in. I also have Phoenix number 1.
Yeah. I just watch them play during preseason, and you think about the guys that they roll out there. They've got concerns defensively, but the firepower offensively, and KD's just proven he's a guy, obviously, that's elite talent, can fit in with anyone. Booker, to me, is like a guy that I think is still underrated by some in terms of the elite offensive talent that he is. And then guys around the margins, like they got Eric Gordon, who's just another good offensive player, guy that'll space it all the way out to 28, 30 feet, deep behind the arc. And the Nurkic acquisition, I like certainly more offensively than defensively. And the Ayton thing had come to a head. It was over. And so the concerns for me are more defensively there with him, but I still like him as an offensive center. Like, if you leave him one-on-one, like he can score in the post, he's going to make the right pass. He can even space it out to 3 a little bit. But again, just with the talent they have, and I haven't even mentioned Bradley Beal yet, that's just how much offensive talent these guys have.
Yeah.
Like, to me, the way they can spread it out and just score on you, whether it's in pick and roll, whether it's just drive, kick, swing, or just straight ISOs for Booker, Beal, and KD, like, they're going to be really, really tough to guard.
Yeah. So important to remember a couple things here. We're talking about regular season ranking. So this is not predicting how any of this translates to the playoffs. It means that you have to budget in durability concerns because injuries will inevitably affect these rankings. And Phoenix has some of those, Durant tends to play between 50 and 60 games a year, the last few years. Beal has low-key not been terribly durable. Booker is pretty durable, but those other two have some questions. Even so, like, when these teams come together, when there's sort of these veterans joining up, I hesitate to use the term super team because I don't know if Phoenix truly qualifies as that. But when these established all-stars link up, the first season is typically like honeymoon city. And like the rest of the league is just bewildered as to how to stop and guard these guys. And the ball is really popping and moving and everyone is rowing in the same direction. You think back to Kyrie, Harden, Durant, those styles don't necessarily all mesh in a vacuum, but when all three were together, they made music together. And, Beal as a point guard, that'll take some adjusting, but they're like Booker and Durant are 2 of the, I don't know, six most talented offensive players in the league, two of the
Yeah.
eight most talented offensive players in the league. And Beal is set up for success. And Nurkic is a good passer out of the short roll. That lane will be wide open for him to occupy. They can play him high, closer to the level to help, or pardon me, closer to the arc to help open up cutters and help manufacture some rim attempts. That's where that team has sort of struggled in years past, is in getting to the hoop. But I think that Booker is now like really entering his physical prime where he can get to the hoop more consistently. Gordon can get downhill. And though, he's no one's favorite player, getting Grayson Allen in that deal is another guy that defenses have to account for. And he has movement gravity as well as standstill catch and shoot gravity. They are going to score a lot of points, man. And they are going to blow teams away in terms of how you guard them and how you structure a defense on some night in January as to how to stop them. So they've got a lot. And so they're my number one team as well. You had Denver as well. We can talk about them, but we're mostly going to agree. Although I do want to hit on Straw there and some of their younger guys as well. But my top four, just so you know, is Phoenix 1, Boston 2, Milwaukee 3, Denver 4. Those are my top four.
Yeah, so I guess we'll jump to Denver then. I have them number 2. Last 2 years in offense, they were 5th and 9th. Going back the last 2 years in offensive rating. Obviously, with Jokic, like there is a very high floor and a very high ceiling when it comes to their offensive output. Arguably, probably the best offensive player in the league and one of the best of all time in his prime. And their starting lineup is elite in terms of the talent, in terms of the chemistry and the viability together. So I don't know that there's too much to talk about with the starting lineup because it's very similar. We've seen how good they are coming off the title. But as you kind of alluded to, the question really is their bench is like very barren. One of the biggest question marks in terms of a bench in the league, and it's like Christian Braun is going to be better. He's going to play a lot. He's going to step into a bigger role. But who else? Like, is Peyton Watson ready to make that step? Is Julian Strawther really going to be what he's looked like in preseason? It's just a lot of question marks. There's a lot of potential answers, but none on the bench that have really proven themselves. Now, Christian Braun's a good player, more so defensively than offensively, which we're talking about here. But yeah, like the starters, ironclad, elite. And then it's just a question of how much that drops off when the bench takes the floor.
And since I expect it to be a little bit of a drop off, that's why I have them 4th. I also think their finish last year of 5th is a tad misleading because they really sort of took the foot off the gas the last month or so. So that's sort of a deceptively low ranking. I don't expect them to do that this season. I don't think they will have the cushion in the Western Conference this season. And so I think they will play hard all the way through the end of the regular season. Jokic has been as durable as they come. It's reasonable to wonder about some sort of like championship hangover. You never know. I think from what I've watched in preseason, I mean, Jokic has been in worse shape, certainly, than he's in now in his NBA career. But he looks like maybe not quite as springy as he was most of last season. He may play himself into shape a little bit. That might slow them down in the beginning. But Reggie Jackson is their backup point guard. He's going to play a lot. Zeke Naji, I think, is going to get a chance to play. Again, good shooter in theory, good guy who can, pump and go or maybe even cut off of Jokic if they share the floor in theory. But it's a lot of theory. And I'll have an episode coming in the next week or so about the Nuggets specifically, about their, journey as returning champs. Calvin Booth just gave an interview that has made the rounds today where he was really, good for Calvin. He is feeling himself, man. He is really, that is some You're a Warriors fan. That is some prime light years ahead
Yeah, exactly.
commentary from Calvin
Which
about,
makes me a little bit more concerned about them this year. But
but they're trying. I mean, they're trying to do a little bit of two timelines and replenish their bench as they go, and think that these guys can all come in and fit seamlessly. That's not really how it works. You don't just draft three rookies and play them all on your bench and they're all good and everything's hunky dory. It's not
yeah,
really going to work like that. But um, they still have Jokic and a ton of shooting.
yeah,
They have that, and so the like you said, floor is high. I think their ceiling is maybe a bit lower, but Jokic is he has lapped the field so much as an offensive presence and player in the league that you have to give them a great deal of respect. So
yeah.
Boston and Milwaukee, I imagine, are pretty close for you, I would guess. To
Um, yeah. I have Milwaukee third and Boston fifth.
So there you go.
So
And I don't know if I haven't really given expanded thoughts on the Drew Holiday and trade to Boston, the Damian Lillard trade in Milwaukee. I might do that in a later episode. I don't, we got to keep this moving. But
yeah,
the Giannis Dame pick and roll is going to be excellent. It's easy, at least for me, to forget that though the idea with the Bucks is, what is it like with Giannis at 5? If you have Giannis at 5 and Dame at 1, and you pepper them with shooting, but Brooke Lopez can space the floor either
yeah,
above the break or in the corners, just in their starting 5. And so they're going to have plenty of space for Dame. And Dame, I think, as people were saying that last year was maybe his best individual season and all this. It really wasn't, because his team wasn't competitive and he didn't defend really at all.
yeah,
So I don't
yeah,
I don't necessarily buy that, but I think it's reasonable to expect sort of a reinvigorated all-around performance from him. And he is such a gifted off the dribble shooter and pick and roll operator that even though their bench is quite thin, I mean, quite thin, like Malik Beasley is going to play a lot of minutes.
yeah,
Marjon Beauchamp, who I like, but is still quite unproven, is going to play a lot. Jay Crowder is going to play a lot. That bench is thin, but the offense between Lillard, Middleton, Giannis, Brook, and Pat Connaughton, I mean, it's just a lot. That's going to be a
yeah,
lot for teams to have to handle, much in the same way that Phoenix is going to present this new unique challenge for defenses night after night.
yeah,
Boston is going to be so well spaced with Porzingis, and Tatum and Brown are still sort of all NBA level talents. Drew as a Drew and Derek White, whoever's on the court, it's just a lot of offensive talent everywhere. And so I think they're all pretty easy picks for the top 5.
yeah. Milwaukee, I agree because yeah, that pick and roll with the shooting that they have around there. You got Malik Beasley, Chris Middleton, Brooke Lopez, all spacing the floor, or Pat Connaughton. Jay Crowder looked a little bit cooked last year. Bobby Portis, though, another positive player.
Yep.
So
Bobby's great. Yep.
yeah, my question's more defensively with them. If they're going to be playing Lopez in a drop, like who's getting over screens and pressuring the ball on this
Sure.
team is my
Sure.
question. But offensively, like the spacing around that pick and roll and then just Dame and Giannis, like that should be a top 5 offense. Um, I too question the depth a little bit after like the top 7 guys, but in terms of a regular season offense, I think teams are gonna put 2 on the ball. The Dame's gonna give it up to Giannis, and they're gonna try to like blitz Giannis, and it's gonna be finding shooters from there. That's what it's looked like in the preseason, and that should work well with the shooting that they have. And so, again, doubts more defensively, but I see them top 5, and I've got them third on this list.
Okay. Excellent. So who is your 4th team? The only one that
Uh,
we don't share in the top 4.
the Warriors.
Oh, well, you're a Warriors fan. You said you were higher
So
on them the other day than
yeah, yeah,
consensus. I will tell you that where do I have the Golden State Warriors? Let me see. I have Golden State lower. I've got Golden State 4, 10, right around 14th is where I've
wow.
got Golden State. So yeah, let's talk it out. Tell me why you must love Chris Paul's addition. So
I'm more so like Jordan Poole's departure. So when
okay.
I think a lot of things about this team, but I think people don't realize how bad Jordan Poole was for the Warriors last year. If he played the most minutes on the team last year in the regular season, if you just filter the minutes out that he played last year, the Warriors had the second best net rating in the league. And if you filter him out, if you just look at the starting lineup, they had the best starting lineup in the league. If you look at Steph on the court with Draymond and Looney, that offensive rating was like 122 last year, which is
Mhm.
just a testament to Steph because neither Looney nor Draymond can shoot, nor do they have any like rim gravity. But Steph makes that work because he and Jokic are on a different planet from everyone else offensively. And
Mhm.
so you just look at all the underlying numbers. They removed guys that were negatives last year, and they've added positive impact players like Jordan Poole. I loved him 2 years ago, and I don't know if it was the championship hangover. It was likely being punched by Draymond, but he was just a bad player last year that turned the ball over a ton, went out of his way to not try to play defense, and the vibes were just terrible around the team last year. They've replaced James Wiseman's minutes, Jordan Poole's minutes, Anthony Lamb's minutes with Dario Saric, GP2, and Chris Paul. Guys that all know how to play and fit in and just play Warriors ball around Steph, Draymond. And behind the scenes, they've said like this team feels like 2 years ago. And those are the vibes coming out of the team. And even last year, even with Jordan Poole sabotaging the team half the year, they still finished as the eighth best offense in the NBA. And so, like,
And Andrew Wiggins missing 25 games.
and
Don't
Andrew
forget it.
Wiggins missing a ton of games, and
Don't forget that.
Steph also missed around the same amount of time. Now he might again, but I just think they replaced a lot of negatives with a lot of just positive impact players. The concern with them is probably health, but Steph looks great. And so like I'm not the type that's like overly optimist as a fan all the time. And I've got my own concerns with guys like Jonathan Kaminga that a lot of people are trying to crown, and I don't see that still. But I do think that they're going to play a ton of vets. I think the vibes are good. I think they finished eighth last year, and by all means, they should be better this year.
Okay, so if I ask, first of all, when I've
Uh-huh.
watched the Warriors this preseason, there's a lot to be encouraged about, right?
Mhm.
And I am especially impressed. I mean, I'm always impressed with Steph,
Yeah.
but I am very impressed with how Wiggins looks. I think Wiggins looks like fantastic. He looks like he is playing so freely in that system now, where, when he first joined the Warriors, they used him mostly as like a spacer, kill these corner threes, really knock them down. But he is a bit more empowered now to be a driver. And I think that is only going to continue because I don't think that Chris Paul is going to be much of a driving threat on this team. Though he'll be involved in split cuts off of Draymond when Draymond comes back. How many games is Draymond going to miss, by the way, with whatever injury?
None. They said he's going to be ready to
That
go.
he's going to be
Came
ready.
on.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
At
Paul will be
most,
able to
like
do
2 games. Yeah.
Paul will be able to do something, but he's I think 37 this year, I
Yeah.
believe, and has not been a real rim threat much recently anyway. I know the positive buzz around the Warriors are like, they're only going to play him like 22 minutes a night.
Hmm.
I'll believe that when I see it. I think Chris is going to play as much as Chris wants to play on that team, basically. And because there might be, again, like a honeymoon period where teams are maybe giving him a bit more respect on the perimeter than he deserves. He and Steph have already done some screening action for one another that, is making defenses sort of pick their poison. The poison I would pick as a defense is to guard
Yeah.
Steph Curry personally, but I think ultimately his offensive impact is going to be a bit more muted. But Wiggins as a driver, because I don't, Clay's not going to be much of a driver either. He'll cut a little, but he's slowing down notably as well.
Yeah.
But Wiggins is square in his prime, still athletic as hell, still has never really suffered like a really debilitating injury. And I just think he has a lot of comfort in that system. But you mentioned
Yeah.
Saric, GP2, and Chris Paul, right? As
Yeah.
these vets replacing
Mhm.
negative players. Do you think Saric is going to play more than Jonathan Kuminga?
Um, well, I think Kaminga's gonna. I think he can play a lot just because he's so young. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he's gonna be ahead per se of Saric in the rotation. Like Saric is the third big, and Kerr's gonna love him. But again, Saric is replacing minutes that were a combination of James Wiseman, JaMychal Green last year, who
Yeah.
those guys were just terrible for the Warriors.
But did
So
either
he's
one of them play that much last
uh,
year?
JaMychal Green played quite a bit, and
He
Anthony
did.
Lamb. Anthony Lamb was the backup four last
Yeah.
year. So they're replacing some of those minutes with just positive impact players, and they're old for sure, but their depth is better than these other teams because they got the starting five: Steph, Clay, Wiggins, Draymond, Looney, and then they have Chris Paul, Saric, GP2, and then Kaminga, Moody as their
Mm-hmm.
10. And then
Mm-hmm.
they've even got, Corey Joseph's got a little bit left, and then we'll see what they got after that. But that's 10 guys to play. They're probably going to play 9 in the rotation. Like Moody to me is probably going to start outside looking in, and that depth is better. Boston's got better depth, but that's better depth than teams like Milwaukee and Phoenix and Denver, for example.
Well, I'll say that the last couple of years, and maybe you did a good job making your case about sort of the negative players who've been in the
Mm-hmm.
rotation the last couple of years, but the last couple of years, the Warriors, when they've been very good, have been very good because they're an excellent defensive team. That has
Mm-hmm.
been like the constant there. And then the offense is sort of Steph is such a good playoff player that he does enough to pull them through, or at least he did when they won the title in
Yeah.
2022. So I, with this offense, I guess I'm just a little, these offenses can jumble up. I have
Yeah.
them 14th. I could definitely see them finishing like 7th, no problem. But I'm a little bit lower on Paul, I think, even though he's got, the Warriors brain, certainly. He's got the
Mm-hmm.
Warriors processing. He'll be invigorated a bit by that. But I don't know that Saric, if Saric is playing, he's looked spry in the preseason. I'll give him
He's
that. I don't think he
yeah.
looks like washed or anything. But when push comes to shove, I think they're going to want one of Draymond or Looney on the court basically all the time. I think they are going to want to minimize when both of them are off just because of the defensive communication, the rebounding, everything that both of those guys bring. So I don't know that Sarge is really going to play that much. And I do think, Kuminga's been one of the darlings of preseason.
Yeah.
In watching him, some of it is sort of preseason chicanery. Kuminga's such an aggressive driver that he really is. He forces a lot of contact, even if that contact is kind of out of control. He's gotten kind of a generous preseason whistle, but it's okay. Like I
Yeah.
applaud him for initiating the contact, but a lot of times it's just sort of like there's not a whole lot of craft present. And I still think he sort of goes into the lane without a ton of plan as to if he's going to shoot or pass. I think he sort of makes his decisions late, but there's a little bit of progress. Kuminga's stroke also doesn't look that bad.
No, looks better.
I think they are going to play him. I think they're going to give him a real chance. And though he brings an interesting dimension, I still think he like when it really comes down to it, they're not going to run a lot for him. And so there's still going to be this tension about how much he really wants to do when he touches the ball. Attention that's not as present with Moody. Moody is more like whatever you need me to do, I'm gonna
Yeah.
do, even if I'm your ninth man for like the third year in a row, or your 11th man, or your 12th man, or whatever. So I think the combination of always having one of Looney or Draymond on, or at least a lot of the time, and whatever sort of growing pains there is with Kuminga, and maybe Paul and Clay not having quite as much, I think it's enough to drop them. I probably have them a bit too low, but
Okay.
man, if they are the fourth best offense in the league, then they're going to be like a top 2 seed in the West, because I think their defense is going to be good. So we'll see, man. We'll
Yeah.
see.
Yeah, I agree with the Kaminga thing. Just to finish up, the only thing I disagree with is that Saric is going to play a lot. Kerr loves him, and he's going to play even if it's next to Draymond a lot. But I think he'll be the lone. They're going to try him as the lone big to start the season on the second unit, and that should juice the offense because he can shoot it. But yeah, I mean I'm looking at their on-off numbers last year. Jordan Poole, the offense was 7.5 points per possession worse on offense when he was on the floor. They lost all these negatives.
I love how in you are on like the
They,
addition by subtraction.
oh yeah, I had to watch Jordan Poole dribble the ball off his foot so many times last season. No, but yeah, I'm not saying that they're like in the top tier, but I have them in a tier with Boston, and then sixth I have the Lakers.
I have the Lakers fifth. How about
Ah,
that?
yeah,
Yeah.
they've looked so good in the preseason, and
Yeah.
you don't want to put too much emphasis on that, but I think at the same time a lot of people don't put enough emphasis on the preseason because I saw this stat that Jovan Buha from The Athletic tweeted out, and I've watched quite a bit of their preseason games, but in 5 quarters that they played their starter or their regular rotation, excuse me, they scored 177 points.
Dude, that they are enormous.
They're
Like
huge.
you need to really, and I don't mean you,
Yeah.
I mean our millions of listeners. You need to really see them play to appreciate how big, how long this team is. And like LeBron is old, but everyone else is basically in their athletic prime or close to it.
Yeah.
Like Reeves looks incredibly well conditioned from
Yeah.
his summer with FIBA. Rui looks like he is absolutely in his prime, and he's always had a lot of strength, but he is moving very, very well. D'Angelo Russell, like he is competitive on defense, at least in the preseason. You could say, oh, it's preseason. My
Yeah.
response is it's preseason, and he's
Yes.
actually trying on
Trying.
defense. Like
Yeah.
they just, and Torian Prince is on this team. Not that he is some athletic marvel, but he's a wing who could shoot, who's a pro, who's not going to be, wasted negative minutes. I like Max Christie, and I think Max Christie is good enough to play in their
Yeah.
rotation this year as another sort of knockdown shooter. Gabe Vincent hasn't even played yet, but he is
Yeah.
going to be a very natural fit as a third guard. And whatever. Christian Wood might play, might not. He's weird. But Jackson Hayes is going to be able to run as a backup center because he's such an amazing athlete for whatever. Like Darvin Ham has so much to work with on that team that like they will rebound the ever loving hell out of the ball. They'll be able to run. They'll be able to dot virtually any lineup they have with a ton of shooting. Like if the only reason they aren't higher for me is like weird injury concerns with LeBron
Yeah.
and Davis, but they
Exactly.
have as much offensive talent probably as anyone outside of Phoenix.
Yeah.
They are ready to go, man. They're really ready to go.
Yeah, I haven't historically been a D'Lo guy at all, but he's talking like he wants to be Derek White on defense, and yeah, he's
Yeah.
playing so well in the preseason and playing with more effort than I've seen from him. And then there's been kind of like pushback on how good Austin Reeves is because he's gotten a lot of notoriety playing with USA. But at the same time, I think he's still kind of underrated by some people. Like just how efficient of a scorer he is. You look at his
Yeah.
efficiency numbers last year, just insane efficiency. And he's playing off of AD, LeBron, and D'Lo. Like the amount of shooting, because what they've done in the preseason is start Prince, Reeves, Russell, LeBron, and AD, and then they can go bigger even if they want off the bench. But that's a ton of shooting around LeBron and AD. And LeBron has dropped off. Like, he's a lower end top 10, top 12 guy, but just that talent offensively that they have. And then Rui's had an awakening in LA too, especially with his 3-point shooting. And so, yeah, like the shooting and just the talent offensively, the way that they've redone the roster over since the second half of last year has been extremely impressive. And then to get Reeves on the contract they did um, is huge for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And they, well, whatever. We've covered the Lakers. We're both very in on them offensively. But, we've talked about in terms of West Coast teams, Phoenix, the Lakers, and
Denver,
Golden State.
and
Denver.
Yeah.
But we have not talked about the number one offensive team from a year ago.
Oh, yeah.
What haters we are to have not mentioned the Sacramento Kings. So where do you have Sacramento?
I have them 8th, so not too far down.
And I have them 7th. Okay. So who do you have in between? Is LA your 6th team? Is that what you said? So
I think they were 5th. Let me see. No, they were 6th. Yeah, and then I have Cleveland 7th.
There you go, another match. I have LA
nice.
5th, Cleveland 6th, and Sacramento 7th. So our top 7 are all the same except for Golden State. Go talk a bit about Sacramento and Cleveland.
Okay. So I do expect a little drop off. I think if you've heard people talk about the Kings in the offseason, you've heard how healthy they were last year, all of that, all the reasons for them to be worse. I do agree with those reasons. I don't think it's likely they'll be as healthy. I think maybe they played a little bit over their heads. I think Fox and Sabonis both had career seasons together. But again, at the same time, anytime you're playing Sabonis at the 5 and you have that level of shooting around him plus Fox as the lead guard, that's a very good recipe. I just think the rest of the league looks really good right now is the main thing. It's not that I'm that much lower on them. I do think it's unlikely they have, 1, the health, and 2, that those guys again have even better seasons than their career years last year. Kevin Huerter had a fantastic shooting season. Harrison Barnes is getting a little bit older in age. Now, Keegan Murray could have a little bit of a step up, and that could help kind of lift the tide and make up for those things. But it's not that I'm that out on them outside of those things. It's just that I'm higher, I think, on other teams mostly. Off the bench in terms of offense, I like Trey Lyles as their 5, and I like Malik Monk as a spark plug off the bench.
Yep. Duarte as well. Duarte as
well. I don't think Vezenkov is really going to play much for them, and Davion Mitchell's not an offensive impact guy, so I think there's a little bit drop off when they go to the bench. But again, their starting unit makes sense, though they're talking about starting Duarte now over Huerter, which might hurt the offense a little bit in terms of the spacing. I think they're betting on a Keegan Murray bump, and I think he will be better. I don't know that I see a huge jump like some Kings fans would hope. But again, it's just a lot of other teams look really good right now, and we'll see how that shakes out.
So yeah, you have him 8th. I have him 7th. The biggest thing to me is that this is still a Sabonis Fox offense.
Yeah.
That is still going to be the vast majority of what they do. And unless I'm mistaken, I believe Fox was one of the best clutch players in the league.
Yeah, he won the Clutch Player of the Year award. Yeah.
There you go. And Fox, obviously a great player, deservedly an all-NBA player last year. I am skeptical that he wins that award 2 years in a row. And maybe he does. Maybe that's just who he is. But, DeMar DeRozan, I think, was the best clutch player in the league maybe 3 years ago or 2 years ago. And then he just had sort of a bit of regression. Fox is going to either have to, really dominate at the rim in those moments or hit a lot of mid-range shots. And he hit a lot of mid-range shots, last year down the stretch in games. And it's just hard to replicate. Just hard to replicate. That's all. I like Keegan as well, but I think though Kings fans are rightfully high on them, the Kings organization is rightfully high on him. They're not going to give Keegan a bunch of pick and roll to run. This team is trying to win playoff series, and that means it's going to be Fox and Sabonis a lot. Yeah. But Cleveland, just to touch on again, we agree on them, so not a lot. They were a very good offense last year. I think they finished like 7th last year.
Yeah, I got them slated in the same spot.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I expect Mobley to be better. Maybe not to shoot threes like everyone is. It seems like everyone dings Evan Mobley for not shooting threes when he's a 7-foot 21-year-old who almost won Defensive Player of the Year and got much better on offense despite not having much spacing on his team. I don't know that dimension is going to be there, but Mitchell and Garland especially is such a good conductor of offense. And with Strus and Yang that they added, replacing sort of Chetty Osman and some Isaac Okoro minutes, there's just going to be there's going to be spacing, and there's going to be plenty of lineups where it's only one big and you're going to have a lot of this space, but Garland's still going to be at the controls. Mitchell can run hot and cold. He can be streaky, but still, a nuclear
second team and all NBA last year. Yeah.
Nuclear offensive player who defenses always have to pay attention to. I mean, you just do, or else he will destroy you. So I think very high floor for them.
Yep.
And after them, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'll just go through my teams until I hit Golden State here. I have New York 8, Dallas 9, Atlanta 10, Minnesota 11, the Clippers 12, Sixers 13, and then Golden State 14. So who do you have up until sort of around 14?
Atlanta 9, Dallas 10, Philly 11, Minnesota 12, Memphis 13, Knicks 14.
Okay, so you did not name the Wolves or the Clippers, is that right?
Yeah, Minnesota was 12.
Okay. Yeah. So did not name the Clippers, and then I did not name the Grizz. That was our one difference there. So I guess whichever team you want to hit, maybe a team that you think is sort of going to be different offensively than last year, because a lot of these teams are going to return similar personnel.
The Knicks, to me, are a fascinating one because you look at their profile last year, they were number 2 in offense behind Sacramento. Yep. And then you look at how they got there, and they did not shoot the ball that well, which makes sense kind of when you look at their roster. Only a 20th in shooting efficiency, but they just killed people on the glass, 2nd in offensive rebound rate, and they didn't turn the ball over, 5th in turnover rate. And so a combination of not turning the ball over, of pounding people on the glass, and being just good enough shooting somehow was good enough to get them up to 2nd, which was fascinating kind of to think about how they got there. And so that to me is interesting to see whether they can keep up the offensive rebounding and the turnover rate, or whether that was kind of just like a 1-year really weird blip statistical profile. Mm-hmm. Because I think when you go back, I don't have it written down, but they certainly were not top 5 on offense. I think they were around like 20th or something the year before.
Yeah. And the year before that, they were higher. Like the COVID year, they were higher as well. They've been sort of Jekyll and hiding it for a little while now.
Exactly. Yeah. So does that happen again? Can they maintain that? Like who are like the internal candidates to improve? Like they do have those guys. Maybe Barrett takes another year, another leap. I don't know. Maybe Quickly does. But like Jalen Brunson had a career year last year. Julius Randle's on this Jekyll and Hyde every other year thing as well. So they, to me, are probably the most fascinating one, looking at their profile, again, how they've Jekyll and Hyde and If you just look at that lineup on paper of Brunson, Grimes, Barrett, Randall, Robinson, there's no way you would you would peg them as like a the second best or even a top 10 offense, I don't think. Um, so where did you have them again?
I had them right for Sacramento. I had them
Oh
eighth.
wow.
Yeah.
So what do you believe in kind of maintaining for them this year?
Um, Low turnover rate because they play so much ISO. I mean, that's
Yeah.
why they don't turn it over very much. They also got, I think, a lot better in transition and playing in transition more after they traded for Josh Hart because I think
Yeah.
he is such a good rebounding guard and such a good transition player. He is probably the best transition player on the ball in the NBA who is not like a star player.
Yeah.
Once you get past sort of max guys, he is
Hmm.
probably the best guy in transition in the league. And um, Brunson, I think in ISO is still going to give people a lot of problems,
Yeah.
and they are just going to beat the hell out of you. They will just beat the hell out of you. And that means that they're going to get to the line. Brunson can beat the hell out of guards at point of attack and he can get foul calls. Randall can get to the line. Barrett is a free throw magnet. And with Robinson, Randall, Barrett, Hart, all these guys can offensive rebound. Like it is so exhausting to play this team that I just, and their depth is very strong. Hartenstein, I always get that wrong too, Isaiah. But as a backup center, he's excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent as a passer out of the elbows. Never really wastes any movement or motion with the ball. He can finish himself. He can run the floor. And with Grimes and DiVincenzo and Hart, they're always going to have either transition play on the wings or in Grimes's case, he's a great shooter and connector. Quickly is a shooter and connector. There isn't a lot of there's not going to be like a wasted roster spot. This is not a team that's bringing any sort of rookie or second year player really along. Like they want
Yeah.
to hit the ground running and play hard and sort of run and bump you off the court. And that's what I think they're going to do. So, yeah, I think they have a lot that is stable this year.
Yeah.
I'll put it that way.
Uh,
Among some of these other teams, Dallas, I flirted with Dallas as a top five
mhm.
offense for a bit, but eventually I reined myself in, both because they're going to play lively in Omax, at least a decent amount.
Yeah.
And Luka's got this weird thing with his calf that is still unresolved that I don't love. But Luka and Kyrie, like after they got Kyrie, their offense was regularly in the 120s. And so again, there's just such a high baseline. It's hard to ignore that. Um,
Yeah.
Atlanta is going to be a bit different because they have a full year of Quinn Snyder. You and I are both a fan of Jalen Johnson. He's going to
Yeah.
play a little more. There's, I think they're going to play two guys in the front court who like don't shoot well together a lot. They'll play either Okongwu and Capella or Capella and Jalen Johnson or Okongwu and Jalen Johnson. That'll depress stuff a little bit, but Trey's still a great offensive engine. Quinn's already using him off the ball a little bit, having him, run zoom from the corners to, get going downhill as opposed to top of the key pick and rolls forever. Bogdanovich, Sadiq Bey, Hunter, AJ Griffin, who we both like. There's a lot of just surrounding catch and shoot shooting on that team, so they'll be good. Minnesota, Towns isn't going to play five all the time, but between him and Ant, there's just a lot of offensive talent there. Uh, Philadelphia is interesting to me because with Harden, who knows where he's going to be. I think he'll probably start there because I can bet on Daryl Morey being stubborn pretty confidently. But even if he plays, you've got that pick and roll with Embiid. That's
Yeah.
a very high baseline. Even if he doesn't play, I think that Maxey and Embiid pick and rolls are going to be very good. I think that their addition of Oubre, while Oubre is not like he doesn't have warrior brain
Yeah.
necessarily, he as a bench wing who can like get hot and shoot and spot shoot. I think he's a very good addition. Um, and I don't know. I just think there's something. I expect them to be a much better defensive team, and I expect them to be a better conditioned team under Nurse. Like they never played in transition under Rivers because they were always sort of loafing up
Yeah.
the floor. And I expect there to be sort of a new dimension, a more defense to offense dimension there under Nurse that I think is going to prop their numbers up a little bit. So I think that
Yeah.
they're interesting. So um, our one difference here was, let's see, Memphis and the Clippers. So with John missing so much time, what do you like about Memphis?
I mean, I still really like their lineup offensively because they've got a lot of shooting. Like Kennard, I think is going to get the chance to start, and that would be a lineup: Kennard, Baines, Smart, Triple J, and Adams. And Kennard, to me, like I understand his liabilities and like his viability is like a good playoff guy, but I still think he's a little bit underrated because you look at the best shooters in the NBA over the last few years, like he's consistently shooting like well over 40% from three above the break. Uh, and so like a lineup with Kennard, Bain, Smart, JJJ, and Adams should be good enough to like hold the water until Ja gets back.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because again, if you're choosing Kennard, you're choosing a little bit more offense there in that spot. And then when Ja gets back, I think that should be like a top 10 to 15 offense. So that's where I have them slated in at 13th. So not that much higher than you. They were, I think they were 10th or 11th last. They were 11th last year in offense. So they would have to maintain a similar profile. And I think swapping in Smart and out Dylan Brooks is not going to hurt that. So I'm expecting a similar profile. I think giving Kennard a little bit more minutes is going to help juice the offense while Jaw's out. So that was kind of the equation there of how I got them at 13th.
Yeah, you and I think we disagree on how much Kennard is going to play. I haven't heard that he is sort of their de facto, I guess, fifth starter
Starter.
candidate. I've actually heard that Zaire Williams has a shot at that
Hmm.
slot. I think John missing 25 games just hurts him on offense. I mean, they've been good without John in the past, but Tyus Jones is also no longer there, number one. And number two, those numbers got a little shakier last year without Ja.
Yeah,
And it
for
like
sure.
it at some point it's common sense. Ja averages 25 at least and is a pick and roll threat with everyone, is this great live dribble passer. And I think that for all of Smart's gifts, gifts, not gifs,
Gifts.
for all of his gifts as a defensive player, as a communicator, I expect their defense to be excellent, but I just think there's going to be like a step back on offense because of Ja's absence. I have them 19th. And so, and like you can have again a large jumble there from
Yeah.
whatever 15. I think I have 15 to 21. So maybe a deceptive difference, but still a notable difference. I also think that like Memphis's identity is defensive. So like I think that they'll play David Roddy a good amount because I think that he is a strong guy on the wing who can, hold up in maybe not in like a one-on-one defensive matchup and against a great wing, but is sort of a tough rebounder who can, move guys off of their spot and play in rotation. Like I think he'll get a chance. And their bench is kind of younger than it has been in years past.
Yeah.
And so I think that'll sort of nudge them a bit down as well. But uh the Clippers, I imagine, like the Clippers are the Clippers. There's not a whole lot new to say about them. I just Kawhi and Paul, you mentioned the 120 rating when Steph shared the floor with Draymond and with Looney.
Uh-huh.
When Kawhi and Paul George play together, that's what the Clippers do. I mean, that's where they are. They're still, I think everyone's tired of talking about them, and they're tired of this roster construction, and they're tired of Kawhi never saying what's going on with him and them missing time, and that's all fine. But he and Paul George are two of the best wing shooters in the league. I mean, they really, really can score. And, you know, if they get Harden, that's going to be a boost to them. I flirted with having them higher, but with injuries with them, you got to discount it a little bit. I just, it's all, I think the pendulum has sort of swung too far on that team. I think they are still well coached. They're still deep. We didn't talk about Kobe Brown, all rookie Kobe Brown. I mean, it's probably not going to happen, but talented spacer and shooter. They now have, in Zubats and Mason Plumlee, they're not setting the world on fire, but they don't need to like force Marcus Morris at center all of the time. There's just a bit more structure there, a bit more like traditional depth that I kind of like. I just think they're going to be good. I think they're going to be a very good offense. So that's my defense there. So, and now we're about at like half the league, right?
Yep.
Unless there's anyone else you want to hit. So
I just wanted to throw a stat out to illustrate your point. If you look at the ranking of the offensive ratings in the league last year, 14th was the Nets at 115.4. And then it's like a big group all the way down to 21. The Pacers was 114.7. So only 0.7 difference between the 14th and the 21st ranked offenses. So you'll see that every year where there's a couple just big groups with very little separating 4, 5, 6, 7 even teams.
Yep. And that group for me, by the way, is I have 15 through 21. I have Utah 15, Indiana 16, Chicago 17, the Pelicans 18, Memphis 19, OKC 20, and the Houston Rockets 21. That is my grouping there.
Yeah, we had very similar. I had OKC 15, Clippers 16, Pacers 17, Pelicans 18, Houston 19, Chicago 20, Miami 21, Utah 22.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. This tier is interesting because when you talk about the depth of the league and just how much talent is there, if you look at any individual team in isolation, you can talk yourself into them, but this tier is kind of where the rubber meets the road, because if you are in this tier as an offense, then in order to be a top 6 team, really challenge for a guaranteed playoff spot, even a play-in spot, like you need to have a very good defense, good to very good.
Yeah.
That's just how it goes. This is a game of offense and defense. And, for some of these teams, let's say the Pacers, who I think are like a trendy preseason pick, right? So the Pacers, Halliburton, brilliant player. I think with him and Buddy Hield on the floor or something like that, Buddy Hield and Mathurin, maybe, they were in the 120s. Buddy Hield has so much shooting gravity. Mathurin has downhill chops. Halliburton, top 12 shooter in the world, top 10 passer in the world. Maybe I'm being, conservative there. They've got a ton. There's a world where Halliburton plays all 82 games and they finish higher than this and they nudge their way into the top half of the league. But they're bringing along young guys. They're bringing along Mathurin and Jarris Walker. They're playing with Obi, and Obi can run and dunk, and that's great. But in the half court, he's not the best shooter. And I don't even remember who Jalen Smith, I think, is their backup big after Miles Turner.
Yeah, and he and Isaiah Jackson. So
yeah, and I'm not super sold on any of them being like ready to win minutes offensively against other guys. And though I like TJ McConnell, I like Nembhard, Carlisle's going to be creative with multiple guard lineups and trying to cross teams up. I think they'll be good, but I also think they're kind of rickety if anyone misses any time, especially Halliburton, obviously. But as soon as injuries start to nip at them, I think that they'll sort of come back to the pack a little bit. Well, who are some teams you want to hit in this range?
Let's see. Houston's interesting because I thought I was pretty high on them at 19. You had them like 20, right?
Yeah, right around the same spot. Yep.
Okay. Last year they were
Real
29.
bad.
Only San Antonio. Oh, no, 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 no. They were 27th. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
111 offensive rating last year. But I just think Udoka is really going to help with having some type of structure offensively. And they've got so many options for internal growth that you feel like at least a couple of those are going to hit. Whether it's Jalen Green's efficiency improving, whether it's Jabari Smith looking more like an NBA player with a guy like Fred VanVleet setting him up and better spacing, whether it's Şengün taking that next step to maybe he's not an all-star because of the defensive aspect, but where he's like, oh, this dude's like one of the great offensive bigs in the league. Or maybe Amen Thompson's way ahead of where we expected. There's just so many avenues for just somebody to pop and really help pull them forward. But the main thing with them is why, I like him more than some of these other teams is just the depth of decent players. Like when they go from their first to their second unit, they're going to play different when they got guys like Tari Eason and Amen coming in playing with a ton of energy. But there just isn't really a huge drop off from their first shift to their second shift. I guess depending on what you think of certain players, but the depth of players they have, the opportunity for internal improvement, just how they've got nowhere to go but up, and having a coach in Udoka and a guy like Fred VanVleet to raise the floor, all those aspects really help. And then the other thing is they are not going to tank this year because they don't have their pick. And so like they're going to be trying to win. And they've been bad for too long now. Like they've got to try to win games. And so a lot of factors kind of going in their favor. And the West is going to be really good. But I still think they're going to exceed at least some expectations.
I think they will too. I'm higher even on their defense than I am on their offense. Like, I've watched a good amount of Rockets this preseason too, because I just love this team. I love how much talent they have. Yeah. And they have looked like good. Yeah. They have looked like they will legitimately, and I know this is an offensive episode, but they are going to turn defense into offense a good amount. I mean, Tari looks enormous. And, between him, when he shares the floor with Jalen Green and they can get out and run, I mean, Amen too, but Jalen especially, since he's going to be their horse on offense. I just think that they can not run teams off the floor, but they can put up points in a hurry when they are turning teams over with their length. VanVleet and Brooks, one thing that they share is that they are very good sort of ball denial pest annoyances as defenders.
Deflections.
I mean, they're not the most long-armed guys.
Fred VanVleet's just always a high deflection guy, though, even at his size.
Right, and because they help very strategically, and they just are tough to drive on. Like, they're just pesky. They stay in front. They play with strength, and it's just hard. And so I think offensively, I think you'll see a leap from both Jalen and Jabari. I think everything they've said about using Fred as an off-ball player is like music to my ears. That means he's not going to, he's not going to sort of think that because he's a max player, he needs to play pick and roll all the time. And he's not that kind of guy, but still, it's good that they're not making that mistake. And I just think Jabari's looked phenomenal in preseason. Jalen looks like he's stronger and is like really ready to pop. And Şengün can have chemistry with anyone on offense. So it I think their bench is still, Jeff Green helps, but it's still a young bench. And so, especially if Whitmore and Thompson are both going to play,
Yeah.
that's sort of what's dragging them back. And it's not like everything's going to click immediately. And they're still playing, Dylan Brooks is still going to play a lot. So, you know,
Yeah.
there's a ceiling there, but there is like going to be real competency, and there will be nights when they are one of the most fun teams in the league. I'll say that
Yeah.
in this tier, the two teams that I have the capacity to be the most wrong about are probably the Pelicans and the Thunder.
Yeah.
Thunder, again, are a trendy pick. And I do think they will be better than on defense than this on offense. They
Hmm.
also love to play five out. There's always going to be space in the lane. SGA is a killer. So it could all work. I love Jalen Williams to death. Um, but I don't know that, like, Dort's going to play a lot and he's going to shoot plenty. Giddy's going to play a lot. His offensive numbers, we talked about this in our
Yeah.
episode earlier this summer. His offensive numbers are not great. He has his game where he can sort of get downhill in a cleared lane and
Yeah.
try these, little flip shots at 6'9". But there's going to be like a deceptively sort of tight floor for Shea, I think. I also think that
Yeah.
teams should just sort of let Chet show them how much he's really going to shoot from three, how much he really wants to do that. And with as many young guys as they're bringing along in the depth of their roster, whether it's Wallace or Jang,
Yep.
or Wiggins or whomever, or Jalen Williams from Arkansas, I just think there's a good amount of guys that still need to find their footing. The team is just so young.
Yeah.
I did an episode on them with a Derek Parker a couple weeks ago, and I told him, I was like, look, if they actually win 50 games this year, or they win 46 or 47 games this year, like, this team's going to be a dynasty, because like young teams who do that, they mature into great perennial 55 plus win teams when everyone hits their prime. I I'm still a little skeptical that all of that hits, because as great as Shea is, there isn't really a player on the team who like physically dominates, physically imposes their will that much on other guys. And so there's something still a little fuzzy about it to me. How do you feel about their offense?
So the obvious upgrade or reason to believe is Chet is going to be taking minutes instead of a group of Jalen Williams, JRE, Poku, whoever you want to throw in there. So
Poku.
that's definitely an upgrade. But I agree with you in that they do have depth, but they have so much youth. Like you said, like their starters are obvious, but they're going to be playing probably two of the three of Kaysen Wallace, Jang, and Jalen Williams, the Arkansas Jalen Williams. Like those are all really young players that are unproven offensively. Um, I hope they play Isaiah Joe because their lineups last year with Joe in, like he juiced those lineups. They need that shooting. They don't really
Yeah,
have that shooting on the roster outside of him.
I'm sure they'll
Um,
play him. I mean, we talked
they've
about it
got
with
to.
all rookie, but yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure they will. Yeah.
SGA to me, like obviously made that leap last year. Like it's hard for me to see another leap. Like he's already a top 8 player in the league, in my opinion. And I'm a little bit lower on Giddy, as I've made clear, and a lot of Thunder fans don't appreciate that. But the numbers, like we've talked about, haven't been there for him. And so that's where I settle, where I think I'm a little lower than consensus. Like they're too young to make that leap where they're winning 50 games, like some people are talking about, or even high 40s. I do have them a little higher than you. I think I had them 15th offensively, and I'd probably have them
Mm-hmm.
around 10th or so defensively.
Okay. Yeah. I think I'd have to double check my defensive rankings, but I have them, I think, somewhere between like 10 and 13. I
Yeah.
think their defense is going to be sound. But New Orleans, it's easy to assume that Zion's going to get hurt. They actually were a better defensive team last year than they were offensive. Trey Murphy is out for another probably 6 weeks or so with his torn meniscus. So that hurts, but like there's a world where Zion like plays 60 games. And when Zion, this is sort of speculation because Zion and Trey have not really shared the floor much at all in their careers. But
Yeah.
if that happens this year and we're in, from January to April and they play 40 games together, that's going to be a very difficult offense to stop. That is like a death taxes and Pelicans offense situation where Zion is so destructive. McCollum is still going to be a pro, at point getting his buckets, and you'd have Ingram and Trey as threats around him. It's going to be very good. And I can see for that stretch, a 25, 30 game stretch, them being a top, 5 or 10 offense. So you never know. But in averaging all of it out, that's where I came down. Yeah, I guess we were a little different on Utah because I had him towards the top of this tier. You had him at the bottom. I love Markkanen. I love Will Hardy. Their guard play is still a bit unsettled, like we said, with Keontae George, but they also are going to, if they're not playing 5 out, it's because Kessler's on the floor. And Kessler is such a target, a vertical target rolling down the lane, that their offense last year with him on the floor was excellent. When him and Lowry on the floor, they put up a 120. When Lowry was on the floor with Kelly Olynyk, they put up a 120. When Kessler was on the floor without those two, they put up like a 117. Like they are really, really well constructed to space and just to put up numbers. I think John Collins is going to like blend in relatively seamlessly there. I think they've got a lot of talent as well. So that's why I had them, I guess, 15th, or wherever it was where I had them.
Yeah, maybe I'm too low on Utah. I had them 22nd. They were 10th last year, but I think they were much higher than that and then dropped off the second half of the year. I just think it's tough to have a good NBA offense with the group of guards they have. Like, I think like Chris Dunn looks good. He's kind of revitalized his career, but some people in Utah think he should start. And so that kind of gives you the idea of the group of guards they have. I think Sexton's a little underrated at this point. Like he put up good numbers before injury last year. Clarkson, we kind of know what he is. Horton Tucker, if he's your point guard, like he's probably not driving uber efficient offense. And then it's Agbaji, and then it's Keontae George. And so there's not a ton of plus offensive NBA players there right now. And then my other concern, well, I love their front court rotation, is are they going to kind of go bigger by default now because they're going to play Kelly Olynyk, but they're starting Lowry at the 3 this year with John Collins. And so I'm a little worried about them going big, and maybe that helps them defensively but lessens the spacing. And like, is Collins just going to be kind of parked in the corner like he was in Atlanta last year, while Kessler is kind of the diver offensively? So I'm a little bit concerned with them going size defense and maybe not having the spacing offensively.
Yeah, I'll double check this as I'm talking to you. They played Lowry, Olynyk, and Kessler together a good amount last year.
Yeah,
they did, and I think those numbers were good.
But I like Olynyk. To me, Olynyk's one of the more underrated offensive players in the league. Like they're talking about running more offense even through him this year, but like as a ball handler, passer, facilitator, even score offensively, I like him better than John Collins.
So yeah, in about 450 minutes last year, Markkanen, Kessler, Olynyk sharing the floor. So Markkanen at the 3, 122 offensive rating, +8 net.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And and I kind of buried the lead. Like to me, Lowry Markkanen, like I think he's a top 15 player in the NBA. Yeah. Like, to me, he is that good. And I think he's gonna prove it again, even maybe taking another step up this year, but to find, because you kind of think of him as being like this Euro guy that's a scorer. Like he's a good defender. He's one of the better rim protectors in the NBA. But then to have his shooting and scoring ability, and now he's like legit built and can just take people inside and finish if you're going to put a smaller guy on him. Like I think he's a clear all NBA like top 15 guy. And so that helps their case. Um I'm just worried about the guard mix and what exactly Collins is going to do offensively.
Nah, I mean Collins is used to sort of low usage spacey stuff in Atlanta, but
Yeah, well,
I
that's
don't know,
when he
man.
was at his least effective. So we'll see.
I guess yeah. I mean, it's not like he's not going to get a lot of minutes at the five. I just
No,
think that
I don't think so.
Markkinen is such a talent. A talent as a cutter, talent as a one-on-one player, talent as obviously a spacer, as a relocator, that you can just do a lot in screening for him and using him as a screener. And I think it just sort of is a rising tide. I think it's going to lift everyone on that team. And I put him 15. I could have had him higher. Like the guards do have me a little queasy, but the Markkinen's crazy. A legit unbelievable season. And
Yeah,
he has looked to me
amazing.
good. Like I think he looks like he's in great shape and he's
Yeah,
just enormous and he hits everything. So
yeah,
I mean, he's the poster child for how deep the league
yeah,
really is. So yeah, Utah's very, very interesting. So we haven't yet talked about Victor Wembanyama and the
yeah,
Spurs in great detail. They are my next ranked offense. And
yeah.
I mean, I've mentioned I wanted to talk about Jaime Jaquez. Maybe I will. But my next batch, which is really sort of rounding it out, is San Antonio, Orlando, Miami, Toronto, Brooklyn, Charlotte, Detroit, and then I had Portland and then Washington as my last two teams. I imagine you're similar with that. What do you have?
Yeah. I have Miami 21, Utah, San Antonio, Orlando, Charlotte, Brooklyn at 26, and then Toronto, Portland, Detroit, Washington.
Okay.
So pretty
Okay.
similar.
So talk to me about Wembenyama and
Mhm.
what you think his offensive talent will really manifest for the Spurs this year.
It's it's crazy how quickly the expectations for him change day to day, and just I'm fascinated to see game to game the reactions that people have watching him, or like, after game one it's going to be like he's going to be the greatest player ever, and then after game 10 it's going to be like, oh, we should lower our expectations. We said it was going to take a while for him offensively. I feel like the back and forth yo-yoing with him is going to be interesting. But from what we've seen in the preseason, after some people were concerned, from Summer League has been the preseason, he's looked amazing. uh, Even I've been saying that I think by year two, he's going to be like in the defensive player of the year conversation. And I think you're going to feel his impact more defensively right away. That offensively, he's going to have to get used to and kind of figure out his role and where he fits in and where he can be at his most effective. And I also don't know that he's going to shoot like, kind of like we said for Chet, I don't know that he's going to come in and shoot 37% from three right away either. So I don't know what his efficiency was going to be. But now, after seeing him in the preseason, he just does stuff that you can't explain, and it's hard to deny when you
Yeah.
see him do that stuff. You fall for it. And Popovich is talking like, yeah, we're not going to limit him at all. Like, why would we do that? We're going to let him do whatever, just try everything. And from there, we'll kind of figure out where to kind of rein you in, where your spots are going to be, where to go with you from there. So I think he's going to have pretty free reign to do what he wants. And that's going to be really fun to watch. And because of that, I ended up having San Antonio higher than I anticipated. I had him 23rd.
Yeah,
Um,
22nd for me. Mm-hmm.
but I think part of people paying attention is people are going to realize that Devin Vassell's really good, a really good shooter. He's like, to me, going to have a hopefully a borderline all-star caliber season. He averaged like 20 points per game last year, but I don't think anybody watched the Spurs play very much last year. But Zach Collins to me is an underrated, like good NBA player as well. And I think that they're certainly going to be interesting to watch. I don't know that any player in the history of the league has altered the watchability of a team from one year to the next, like Wemby's going to do. And I think
Well, Bilal for me, but
Bilal for you,
I'm an
yeah, for us
exception.
nerds, for yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think they're going to
Yeah.
be above. Basically, where I came down is I think he's going to be good enough right away, paired with Devin Vassell, and I still think Greg Popovich is a coach you have to respect. I think those factors are going to get them above the dregs of the league.
Yeah, I think I mean Wembanyama. I think if there's one thing that will keep them sort of out of the teens offensively, one is you have to remember, though Vassell's good, the spacing around Wembanyama is going to be weird. If they play
Yeah,
him with another big frequently, they don't have another big who can shoot. Zach Collins, Charles Bassey,
Zach
these
Collins is
guys.
shooting. Have you? Zach Collins has looked amazing in preseason. We'll see. I kind of think he's good, but
Okay.
we'll see.
Okay. I'm gonna remain skeptical that
Yeah,
he's gonna be like launching 7 threes in
but
a game and knocking him down.
to your point though, Sohan, even Trey
And
Jones,
right,
yeah,
so exactly, that's
and
what I'm
Keldon,
saying.
yeah,
So like the spacing isn't going to be great, and if nothing else, playing through an NBA regular season, and though we can make whatever jokes we want to about rest and the Spurs and
yeah,
whatever, there is a rigor to playing guys this big and strong all the time. Wemby got through that French league season like very well, and the team went to the finals and everything, and he was great. But as a 19 turning 20-year-old and I think in like January or something, like it will take its toll, and
yeah,
so I think that and maybe the Spurs strategically only play him 60, 65 games proactively because of that. They are like the team of rest. I think that is also going to make sure that this team is sort of reined
yeah.
in and in this area. Um, but it's going to be great. Going to be great to watch. I mean, that alley oop or that give
Yeah.
and go alley oop was incredible, from
Yeah.
beyond the 3-point line and everything. So
Yeah.
I I'm sure they're gonna run him off of screen. They're gonna start him in the corner and run him off of screens and get him going downhill, and that's gonna be insane. But when you say that they want him to try stuff, I think part of that is developing his timing as a passer and as a playmaker. And he
Yeah.
has, again, a lot of talent, because when you have an 8-foot wingspan, then like, yeah, you can get to a lot of crazy passing angles. But deciding when to shoot, when to pass, who to look for, what his reads are on any given possession, that stuff is all going to take some time to iron out. He'll have his games where he's turning the ball over or when he gets into foul trouble and, just rookie stuff. But yeah, I mean, they'll be phenomenal to watch. And I'm very interested to see how he and Vassell interact, because Vassell's development has been sort of the traditional like wing who starts to run pick and roll a little more kind of
Hmm.
development, and that relies on a certain predictability. When you have, in his case, Jakob Pertl as a DHO partner,
Yeah.
you get a lot of the same looks because Pertl's only going to be in so many different spots on the floor, possession after possession. With Wemby, it's like this insane, hurricane
Yeah.
where you don't know where it's going to be or everything. So how Vassell adjusts to that will be interesting to me. But look, man, Orlando is a team a lot of people expect to make a jump where they could. I think their defense is going to be good. The spacing is still a question for me. I think I've liked what they've seen, or pardon me, I like what I have seen of them in the preseason, playing Wendell Carter on the perimeter basically exclusively. Lots of cutting with Fultz and Franz off the ball and having Paolo be sort of a pseudo, passing hub, just sort of like a drive and kick guy first. I think all of that has looked pretty good. So there's a chance that they bump up a little. It's just hard to turn the math when you have three sort of average or worse shooters on the floor at any given time, which is kind of what I see from them. And I'll loop in Miami really quick because having them 24th, which is where I have them, is almost certainly too low and like an insult to them and everything. But they're going to rely a ton on Tyler Hero offensively this season. Unless you think that, Bam played like 75 games. He was basically healthy all of last year. Jimmy will play his 55 or 60, but any sort of a step back from Bam, and they're going to, the games missed math will catch up to them. And Hero, I think, looks good, looks healthy. He's still really skinny, but he can get his shot off at all three levels. He's got a great jumper and great touch. He averaged 25 and 4 last year, for whatever other playoff viability questions you want to have about him, or the whole thing about him being included in this Dame trade. But I think their offense kind of relies on him averaging 23, 24, 25 a night. He's really going to have to be both a movement threat off the ball to provide a lot of gravity that is gone now in Strus, and be a big on the ball threat, particularly when Jimmy Butler is off the floor. So there's a world where they're good because they're the Heat. And so maybe they're good and they have a top 5 defense and they're in the top 6 or whatever. And Hero's averaging 25 a game and he like makes the all-star team and he wins most improved. I think that narrative is kind of there for him, but where I have them ranked, I guess I don't quite see him being that level of all-around scorer. And when you get past that and you 37-year-old Lowry and these young guys that they're going to be playing, like I like Jaquez. Like I like him for all the reasons that people say that they like him. But I also don't believe that he is this game-changing wing athlete. And I still don't really believe in him as a shooter. So like I think he's going to be a bench player. That's great that he's going to get to play, but I just don't know that playing him in Jovic is really, as these early 20-year-olds, Spoelstra only has really done that. The real guy that's been the case for when they've been good was Hero. He's played Bam the whole way through, but they weren't good the first couple of years with Bam. If they're trying to be good and maximize Jimmy's window, I don't know that they can spend so many minutes playing, Jaquez and Jovic. So Josh Richardson's going to play a lot. With him as a spacer is very, come and go. I just don't know that I see it offensively with them. What do you think about either Orlando, Miami, anyone else you want to discuss from this tier?
So with Miami, I look at two things. Number one, and this is just regular season. We've seen what they can do in the playoffs, but regular season, who's getting those point guard minutes, which you talked about, but like Hero's going to have to do that because Kyle Lowry is 37. He's like, did not look great last year, especially in the regular season. And he's certainly not going to be running pick and roll over and over in the regular season. Jimmy Butler can do some of that, but he's probably playing 60 games, saves himself for the playoffs a little bit. So there's reps to be had for running the offense, creating advantages. And I don't know really who does that apart from Hero on this team. So like you said, who's that point guard, backup point guard, and that's just a lot on Tyler Hero. And then the second thing I look at with them is they have their starting lineup, but they have these kind of like plotting bigs off the bench in Love, Thomas Bryant, Orlando Robinson. And then they have kind of just like shooter type guys in Duncan Robinson, Cole Swider, Josh Richardson. And Spolstra's so good at making lineups work, but they don't have a lot of those like wing types that can kind of connect lineups, especially in the regular season, I'm saying, because I don't think Butler is going to be playing, 80 games, heavy minutes. Caleb Martin does well at that, but they don't really have like other wing sized guys. Like they played Haywood Highsmith, but that's where it's like people are expecting and hoping that one or both of Hawkes and Jovic is ready to be a positive impact player, and maybe they are. But the chance that both or even one of them are is kind of a risky proposition. And then if that doesn't happen, like their depth doesn't look great to me. But then again, Miami is the team that always finds these guys out of nowhere. And so that's why they're kind of confounding for all those reasons. But when I just look at that roster in terms of the talent, like I don't see it. Like to me, I think they're probably a play-in team.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I just kind of think that like when they were a one seed for a couple of years ago, like, and Kyle Lowry was 35, he was still old, but they had, PJ Tucker play all the time. And PJ is not, some dynamic offensive player, but he is always positive for how hard he defends and his work, boxing out on the glass and just frustrating really good players on the other team, being a connector. But he's like a veteran who always knew what he was doing and knew what he was up to. I guess that guy, not playing the same way, but like that version of that guy is Kevin Love now. And
Yeah.
I respect Spoelstra so much, but like it's just a lot to make a meal out of
Yeah.
if Kevin Love is going to be playing so many minutes. And even Caleb Martin, I like Caleb, but is he like the 4 on this team? Like I don't know. Going to be very, very difficult. Anything on any of these other sort of bottom it, like again, this goes to the depth of the league. People think that Charlotte can, really blow away their over under and win 35, 36 games. We spoke about them during all rookie. We don't have to belabor it, but they're going to play a lot of young guys on their bench. And when you stack them up against the rest of the league, unless you believe LaMelo is going to be an all-star this year, they're probably solidly in the 20s.
Yeah.
Brooklyn, Mikal Bridges. I love Bridges, obviously, and he plays with Cam Johnson. People might think, oh, maybe this is some sort of sneaky sleeper team, but you stack them up, and unless you think that Bridges is going to average 28 and be an all-star, it's hard for them
Yeah.
to consistently sort of win physical battles against other teams on offense. So like league's hard, man. Really tough. I don't think I have like much more to add, but whatever you want to go off on, go off, and then we'll finish up.
All right, maybe we'll finish up with Detroit, who I have 29th.
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
28th. Yeah.
yeah. And I don't know that any young team in the NBA has as much riding on one player as they do on Cade, because they have so many players that fit around him and make sense, but they really need him to be this lead guy that I thought he was going to be coming into the draft, and a lot of people still really believe that. And there's certainly a chance it happens, but he hasn't been that yet in the NBA. And so again, like Bogdanovich makes sense as like a third option, but are they going to sacrifice his minutes to play Wiseman, Bagley? I don't know. Are they going to play two bigs together with Duran and Isaiah Stewart? I don't love that offensively in the modern NBA. And, I love Asar Thompson. I like Jaden Ivey, though I'm a little bit worried about him at this point. But those guys are all still so young as well. So the fact that they're relying on their creator, who's unproven, very young, have a ton of youth around them, and look like they're kind of forced to play a lot of bigs, has me questioned how much of a jump they can really make. But again, a lot of this rides on, is there a real jump for Cade like a lot of people believe, or is it just kind of a steady increase, which is kind of where I'm at for him.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that like Boyan is not playing at all this preseason, and
Yeah.
Boyan's going to play for them until they trade him. And you saw last year how reluctant they are to trade him. And they also have Alec Burks, who they
I like Alec
also
Burks. Yeah.
and then and Troy Weaver loves Alec Burks.
Yeah.
So I think though I expect Asar to start plenty of games for them, I think that's like a second half of the year development. And so you'll see plenty of lineups where Cade has both of those guys who, if nothing else, can shoot. They can both shoot off movement a bit. Boyan obviously more so
Yeah.
than Burks. And then, this Biggs issue, I I basically trust Monty to figure it out and to say we're only going to play with, one of these guys a lot of the time. The trouble is that both Duran and Stewart, who I think are a cut above Bagley and Wiseman, both those guys, but
Yeah.
neither one of them is like a huge vertical threat. Duran is a springier athlete, but he's still like 6'9", 6'10",
Yeah.
that maybe 6'10", maybe he's
Yeah.
around 6'10". And
Hmm.
so because of that, there's still just some sort of natural clunkiness to how easy you're making it on Cade. I think that Cade is going to be better. I think that for all his faults, I think we talked about him on our ranking episode. He still averaged like 19, 5, and 5 before he went down. It was inefficient, but
Yeah.
it's hard to have that much usage and be efficient. Paolo wasn't efficient last year at age
Hmm.
20, and he has more physical gifts than Cade does. So I I do think it's going to be a little better. Um, how I think it'll probably take Monty half a season to figure all of this out, but there will eventually be some rotation that I think features Asar, Sasser, Cade, Ivy, Duran, and probably like Burks and Bogdanovich, and that'll sort of be something. And I'm sure Stewart will play too, but you know there'll be something there, but not good enough to really creep up these rankings. If they do like sniff the top 20, it's because Cade sort of really is that guy.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see.
Yep.
Portland, which I'm sure some people are interested in, like Scoot's 19, Shaden is 19. It's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a
I'm
lot
guessing
of
they
time.
trade Brogdon as well.
Yeah, eventually they will. Yeah, when they get the right deal, they'll deal him. So yeah, that's it. That's our ranking. I guess for a quick recap here,
Hmm.
we think, Phoenix and Denver, Milwaukee, Boston are really good. Our main difference in the top five was you like the Warriors. I like them less. But Lakers, Cleveland, Sacramento, Dallas, the Knicks, Atlanta, Minnesota, Philadelphia, we kind of see that as sort of the top half of the league. Our main disagreement there was you like Memphis, I like the Clippers. Middle of the league, Oklahoma City, the Pelicans, the Jazz, the Bulls, the Pacers, the Thunder, the Rockets, and then we just discussed sort of the bottom of the league. So that's how we see it. That's how we see these offenses. Sam, thank you as always for joining. I'm sure this is another 2-hour monstrosity, but that's what we do. When is Locked On? Is Locked On like how frequently is it this time of year? Will it be?
So I've actually stopped doing it just because of family and work commitments. So I've taken a
Okay.
step back and I'm temporarily out of the, let's say,
The
permanent
hosting game?
podcasting, the hosting
Yeah.
game. Yeah, yeah. A lot of other things going on in life, similar to you, but with two kids, with work, with family, and other stuff that has required more of my time. But they're still doing it, plugging away every day, and the season's going to start now for college and the NBA in a couple weeks. So you can still find that podcast almost daily.
No, what a class act, still plugging it.
Yeah.
Whatever, your Twitter account's a must follow for people who really want to follow the draft and follow the league. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yep. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And I'll be checking back in on my offensive rankings every couple of weeks to see how far off I am on some of these.
Yeah, well, once everyone gets injured, it'll all go to hell.
Yeah.
But that's why this is fun. Thank you
Yeah.
all. Thank you all for listening. This has been Chucking Darts. It's okay to be wrong about sports. Find your dartboard and start chucking. Thank you.